Welcome back, Seekers of Truth. I'm your court historian, and in today's explainer, we're diving straight into a dark, forgotten fable to unearth the grim blueprints of our very own psychology. We're going to examine a text that uses some seriously chilling architectural metaphors to expose the war raging inside every single one of us. So let's just get right into the architecture of ancestral fear.
But hey, before we go wandering down into the damp catacombs of this narrative, we actually need to look down into the mud to see our own shattered reflections. The text introduces us right away to this incredibly powerful symbol of the cracked mirror. And notice, this isn't some pristine looking glass you'd find in a grand hallway. It's fractured, it's dirty, and it is profoundly real. It brilliantly illustrates how facing our true, imperfect nature is the absolute necessary first step before we can even begin to understand the structures holding us captive.
And you know, those structures are incredibly deceptive. On the surface, the palace of our society, and honestly our own constructed identity, is adorned with gold leaf and velvet. It projects these vibrant branches and high society delusions. But underneath all of that, the architectural bones are literally walls of exclusion and fear, grown from bitter fertilizer. This beautifully horrific tale forces us to realize that the grand palaces we build are just facades, masking the dark, exclusionary foundations of our own psyche.
To expose this reality, the fable introduces a catalyst. Section 1, The Bard Knight's Arrival, or Unearthing the Past. So, into these vaulted halls steps a high priest of memory, the Bard Knight. He arrives to strike a dissonant chord meant to totally shatter the grand illusion.
And he's not carrying some fancy golden harp of praise, right? No, he wields a lute made of dull lead. Lead is heavy, it's toxic, it grounds us firmly in the mud. Yet, as the text notes, it hums with the creative spark of 1,000 dismissed lives. He's bringing the heavy, ignored truths of the common folk, and really, the suppressed parts of our own minds, directly to the throne of our consciousness.
The moment he starts playing, the consequences are incredibly visceral. As his melody shifts, the room fills with this suffocating mist of guilt. The abstract concept of history suddenly becomes violently physical. The thorns of the past manifest as a literal crushing weight against the lungs of every dreamer present. When you step back from the metaphor for a second, it's just a masterful way to describe psychological weight, the way our suppressed fears and societal guilt can literally make it hard to breathe.
To truly understand this descent, we hit our next section, the true players, ego versus the persona. This is where our historical text turns into a really profound philosophical deep dive. First up, we have the jester, named Motley. Motley is the absolute embodiment of our persona. Think of the persona as that carefully curated outfit you wear to a fancy party, while the superego is that anxious, rigid voice in your head telling you exactly how to behave so you don't get kicked out. Motley is that fragile mask we wear just to survive in society. He's the bloated superego, built entirely to conform to high society delusions and hide the flawed, ordinary commoner by day living beneath the velvet.
And standing right against him is the Shadow Knight. This figure represents our suppressed, raw ego, the dark shadow rising from what the text calls the skeletal belly of the earth to enact a venomous grudge. He emerges from the dark to violently strip away the facade Motley has built. And guys, the dialogue in this confrontation is absolutely chilling.
Listen closely to the archives here, because the Shadow Knight completely corners the jester, his voice dropping into this venomous sneer. He says, "You pathetic, jingling fool, do you truly believe that Motley is anything more than a fragile persona designed to mask the commoner by day you so desperately despise?" The Shadow Knight attacks the very foundation of the persona, calling out the intense self-hatred it actually takes to maintain such an illusion. He just keeps tearing him down, saying, "You dance through the carnival streets, blinded by the intoxicating nectar of your own pride, convinced that the cracked glass of the world reflected a champion rather than the messy design of a man with two lives." The ego is totally taunting the persona here. Remember that cracked mirror we talked about earlier? Motley looked right into it and saw only what his pride wanted him to see, completely ignoring the messy design of his divided self. And so the punishment begins. The knight declares that this descent into the skeletal belly of the earth is not merely a trick of a venomous grudge. It is the ego, the Shadow Knight, finally dragging the bloated superego into the damp catacombs to face the architectural bones of its own repressed history.
He tells him to look upon these walls and witness the stained blueprints of his psyche, foundations built not of gold and velvet, but of exclusion and fear that his high society delusions tried to bury under bitter fertilizer. As your court historian, I gotta admit I shudder a bit every time I read this next passage. The Shadow Knight literally weaponizes memory. He warns, "My hidden trowel is the instrument of a darkest masonry that methodically brings your rough sketch of a life to a permanent, rigid, and structural conclusion." He's taking the fluid, unfinished potential of the persona and just entombing it in cold, hard stone.
It's like this twisted, perverted kind of gardening. He tells Motley, "We are not simply killing you. We are pruning the dead wood of your ambition. To ensure that your heroic silhouette never reaches the sky, grafting your potential instead under the twisted roots of a status quo that demands your stone silence." He forcibly binds Motley's potential to a system that demands nothing but complete and utter silence.
And as the heavy masonry is piled high, the metaphor becomes a suffocating, unbearable reality. Slowly, the knight commands, "Feel the psychological weight, those thorns of the past and historical prejudices, manifesting as a physical weight against the lungs as I pile the heavy masonry around your vanity." He's literally using society's own historical sins as the bricks to wall in the dreamer.
Then he spits out his final verdict, revealing the true crime of the persona. "Your fire of imagination was a poison of dissent that threatened the palace, and so it must be extinguished by the cold reality of iron shackles." Think about that. In this rigid psychological architecture, imagination isn't a gift at all. It's a lethal poison to the established order. So the dreamer gets buried in the ancestral vaults. The text states, "This permanent tomb in the ancestral vaults is the only logical end for a dreamer who dared to look through cracked glass at a world as it could be, only to find himself trapped in the world as it is. He is punished for simply daring to envision a better reality."
And just like that, the darkest masonry is totally complete. The Shadow Knight seals the vault, roaring, "Now let the chilling silence of the earth be the final note of your leaden psalm," leaving absolutely nothing but the horrifying stone silence of the earth.
Okay, let's step back from this terrifying transcript for a second. We really have to ask ourselves, what does this mean for us? Why is the palace, why are our societal structures so utterly terrified of just a mere spark of imagination?
Well, because as the fable shows us, the kingdom's entire stability relies on absolute conformity. The bard acts as a perverted gardener, using the hidden trowel of a venomous grudge to wall in the poison of dissent. The system relies on a containment structure built from the very souls it is excluded, forcing the raw ego to destroy its own potential just to keep the palace standing.
And that brings us to the ultimate conflict, doesn't it? We are constantly torn between these two states. On one side, the world as it could be, full of heroic silhouettes, creative sparks, and vibrant branches of change. On the other, the world as it is, a permanent tomb defined by twisted roots and iron shackles. We wear the mask of Motley to survive, but the Shadow Knight within knows the true cost.
So the crucial point is this. As we close this dark tome and step out of the archives today, I want to leave you with this to chew on in your own life. Are the foundations of your own life built on stained blueprints of exclusion and fear? Are you letting the world as it is demand your stone silence? Or are you brave enough to build the world as it could be? Keep learning, keep questioning, and I'll catch you in the next explainer.